All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the Board of Health meeting for March 12th, 2019. John Hutchings, Chair of the Board, and to my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards, and to Ty's right is the Clerk of the Board of Health, Lydia Hodgkinson, and to her right is our PHSS, that's Public Health and Social Services Director, Shelley Slaughter. To her right is Ramiro Chavez, our County Manager. Vacant in the middle is Dr. Wood. We'll see if she arrives or not. She's been on call or called out to another urgent matter. So we'll see if she gets here in time. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order and have an approval for the agenda or a motion.
I would move to approve the agenda for Tuesday, March 12, 2019.
I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Good. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And that carries. And the approval of the meeting minutes from January 8, 2019.
I move to approve meeting minutes from January 8, 2019.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any changes or amendments or? Nope.
No.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Minutes are approved. Now we're moving to item number 2 in the agenda, and that's proclamations and presentations. And the first one we have is the National Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Jennifer Pop-Hotchkiss is here. Here she is. Hi, Jennifer. Please come on up. Pop-Hotchkiss. I love just saying it because I can.
Hello, Commissioners.
Hi.
So I'm Jennifer Pop-Hotchkiss with the Thurston County Developmental Disabilities Program, and I have a couple of speakers with me today. I have Heather and Savannah. You want to come up to the front? And Jonathan from Morningside, and I'll let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about.
And speak right into the microphone so everybody can home and hear you.
I am Heather Harper. I work for the governor's office. I am an office assistant 1. I scan all the governor's mail, and I have supported employment and have a job coach that helps me with new tasks that I'm learning in my job. And I support this proclamation.
Oh, wonderful, Heather. Thank you. Does the governor get a lot of mail?
Yes.
Yeah. I bet. Next.
Here's Savannah.
Savannah?
I'm Savannah Boy, and I do People First of Thurston County, and I'm the president of all chapter of Thurston County.
You're the president of it?
Yeah.
Wow, good for you. And that's for the People First in Thurston County?
Yes.
God, it's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to add a piece for that, People's First is a self-advocacy organization in both Thurston and Mason County.
All right, thank you.
So, Jonathan?
Hi there, Jonathan Plager. I'm the CEO of Morningside, and our mission is to help people with disabilities find jobs in the community. We support them by finding those jobs and then helping them keep those jobs. And we support both of these ladies and about 1,084 other individuals throughout Thurston County and surrounding counties. And just really feel it's important to have opportunities, not just employment, but other opportunities for people with disabilities in the community to be included in the community just as anyone else would. So we're really thankful for this proclamation and appreciate your willingness to do that and very supportive of it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Jonathan, don't run. How long have you been with Morningside?
I started in 2007 and just took over as the CEO in August 1st for Jim Larson, who had been there for 29 years. So.
Did Jim retire?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I thought you don't look like Jim.
No.
Okay.
We had a good long transition succession plan in place. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. We have Morningside's a great organization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I think so.
Nope. All right, proclamation time.
Read it through.
Yes, sir.
Thurston County Proclamation, Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Whereas Thurston County Public Health and Social Services is involved in advocating for programs that promote positive system changes, allow persons with developmental disabilities to achieve optimum independence, and promote innovative programs and practices that improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. And whereas Thurston County encourages all citizens to actively participate in events that appropriately recognize and celebrate Washington's diverse population, including persons with developmental disabilities. And whereas in Washington, approximately 83,000 adults and children have developmental disabilities, and a majority of these individuals are primarily or solely supported throughout their lifespan by their families. And whereas people with developmental disabilities share with all Washingtonians the desire to achieve personal success through education, meaningful work, and family and community ties. And whereas Thurston County is committed to recognizing that every person, regardless of perceived ability, has valuable strengths, infinite capacity to learn and make decisions, and the capability to make important contributions to their communities if given opportunities to do so. And whereas it is necessary that local communities in Washington, such as Thurston County, support the mission and purpose of Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month and encourage their citizens to recognize and respect this important commemoration. And whereas we acknowledge Washington State's leadership in public policy accomplishments concerning persons with disabilities in employment and their quality of life, and in identifying improvements to public policy that facilitate full inclusion of Washington citizens with developmental disabilities and their families. And whereas Washington State leads the nation with 87% of individuals with developmental disabilities in county-managed employment and day services participating in integrated employment compared to 19% nationally. Now, therefore be it resolved, the Thurston County Board of Health hereby proclaims March as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in Thurston County and calls upon all citizens, communities, state agencies, and elected leaders to increase public awareness of the needs and potential of individuals with developmental disabilities, and to recognize that persons with developmental disabilities are vital and vibrant members of our communities. Adopted this 12th day of March, 2019 by the Board of Health.
Yay. So we're going to come down. Go ahead.
I wonder
Yes,
if I
sir.
could give a little story about how Morningside started and,
Well, heck yeah.
and we built into this.
Go ahead.
They probably don't know this though, but after World War II, you know, we had vets coming home and they were, we used to call it shell-shocked in those days. And a gentleman showed up in Yelm and he didn't have a lot going for him, but he wanted to do something. And so the community, in talking with him, said, well, gee, Dan, what do you have going? You know, well, I could help the storekeepers keep the windows clean or the street or what. So anyway, he went from sleeping in the jail for a while, eventually got an apartment above the fire department, all the different restaurants and stores, a small community now. Anyway, they all contributed to his well-being, got him some pension help later on. He stayed there until his life was over. And if you go out to Yelm, you'll still see the community drinking fountain at the main intersection in Dan Wachowski's honor. And it just goes to show that you can work and be a contributing factor in your community, no matter what your situation is. And that's why I want to thank you, all of you, for participating and becoming participant members and valuable members in your community. Thank you.
Well, that's a cool story. Oh, very
Before we had social
That's a cool
services.
story. Now, are there other representatives in the gallery, though, that want to come up for the photo? Friends, family? And we'll come up and do this now. Who might you be?
You don't really want me to start talking. I'm Shauna Harper, and I'm a program manager at Morningside.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Good for you.
Okay, come on up.
Can't miss a photo op.
Two more.
We gotta get lined up here.
You're tall, I'm sure. This is a good match. All right. Everyone smile. 3, 2, 1. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all for everything you do. Thank you. Tell the governor hello for us. Okay. Okay. Good job.
The next proclamation is National Brain Awareness Month, and Mark Moffett is here. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I'm Mark Moffett with the Veterans Assistance Program here for Thurston County. I'm here to encourage you to proclaim March as Brain Injury Awareness Month for Thurston County. But why? I'd like to share kind of my thoughts on TBI and my experience. As a former commander at Joint Base Lewis McChord at the Warrior Transition Battalion, nearly a quarter of my soldiers had a traumatic brain injury, a TBI. That's up to 50 soldiers in one unit. So it's a lot of folks. Most of those were caused by the shock wave associated with improvised explosive devices, which is very common in Afghanistan and Iraq. I too experienced those in Iraq. And although the symptoms and trauma that my soldiers experienced, they were all unique. However, one of the common things was you could have a hard-charging, motivated warrior just stop. They would stop producing, they would stop leading, and they would stop soldiering, all because of a TBI. Prior to 2001, soldiers that exhibited this type of personality change may have been discharged from the military due to behavior issues. But after 18 years of war and 22% of all U.S. casualties experience a TBI, the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration devoted resources to research and medical treatment to understand more about trauma and how it affects the brain. But this is a military phenomenon. TBI occurs in the civilian population at an alarming rate. There are two age groups that stand out as having the highest rates of deaths and hospitalizations, but for very different reasons. 15 to 24-year-olds will experience TBIs mainly from high-risk activities, whether that's snowboarding, skiing, rock climbing, cycling, whereas greater than 65 years of age, they experience TBIs from falling, just from daily activities. So what does TBI mean to us as a county? We have more than 30,000 veterans that call Thurston County home. This alone increases our exposure to TBI survivors. We know that Thurston County is a great place for outdoors activities such as hiking and snowmobiling and cycling, but these increase our risk of TBI incidents. We also know that Thurston County residents enjoy a great quality of life, which promotes people retiring here. But this too increases the risk of TBIs. In fact, 17% of all of our neighbors are over the age of 65. So what do? We start today with a simple proclamation declaring March as Brain Injury Awareness Month. We do this so that we can reduce TBIs by encouraging the use of safety equipment as a precautionary measure. We do this so that we can educate our community on the symptoms of TBI and identifying those symptoms. And finally, we do this so that we may defeat TBI through research and medical treatment. And Commissioners, this all starts by simply being aware of how TBI affects our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Any comments, questions?
No, but I know it's a trauma. It's funny how the terminology same just changes over the years, but the issue is the same, really, and we're just learning to deal with it now.
Question, Matt? I read the proclamation earlier today, and the fifth whereas gets to me because as you mentioned it describes my son. So this is very, very important. And even with the attention in the last several years to youth and youth sports and such, it's just paramount. People don't, I don't think the majority of people still don't realize how elevated it really needs to be, especially with prevention and then proper treatment immediately after. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
The proclamation.
Thurston County Proclamation, National Brain Injury Awareness Month. Whereas March has been designated as National Brain Injury Awareness Month to promote public awareness on the extent, causes, consequences, treatment, and prevention of traumatic brain injury. And whereas a traumatic brain injury is a bump, blow, jolt, or other head injury that disrupts the brain's normal function, often resulting in a lifetime of physical, cognitive, and behavioral challenges. And whereas an estimated 2.8 million Americans, including 475,000 children, sustain a traumatic brain injury each year, including 795,000 who suffer a stroke. And whereas as many as 8.5 million children and adults nationwide live with long-term disabilities due to traumatic brain injury and stroke. And whereas since 2000, 383,947 U.S. military service members worldwide have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury in deployed and non-deployed settings. And as a typical injury of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, traumatic brain injury presents ongoing challenges for Washington veterans and their families. And whereas early, equal, and adequate access to care greatly increases the overall quality of life of Washingtonians with traumatic brain injury, enabling them to return home to home, school, work, and community. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Thurston County Board of Health hereby proclaims March as Brain Injury Awareness Month in Thurston County and calls upon all citizens to work together to raise awareness of how to prevent traumatic brain injuries and to reinforce the importance of quality rehabilitation and education programs for traumatic brain injury survivors. Adopted this 12th day of March, 2019, Board of Health.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mark, do we have a proclamation to hand to you? And do we have other people here as well for TBI?
Anybody else here? I'll take a picture right in front.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to come all the way down.
Oh, yeah. You're worth it. Thank you for what you do. Go out and look at that drinking fountain someday.
Now, as a point of order, we have later, before we get to the public comment, later in the agenda is the oral health project in Thurston County. It's informational, but we have another proclamation. So should we do the proclamation now?
Why don't we do the proclamation right before the presentation?
Let's do that then. Okay.
Thank you.
So now we're moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the opportunity for the public to address the Board of Health. It's not a time for us to engage in question and answers and such, but it's a time for the public to engage and speak to the board. And so there's a sign-up list, and I will call you up and give everybody an opportunity. If they haven't even signed up, if you want to speak to the Board of Health, you're welcome to. First will be Dr. Dwayne Enyart. Please come on up, sir. And state your name and about where you live.
My name is Dwayne Enyart. I live in Olympia. I have a letter I'm going to read to you. This is dated March the 2nd, 2019. It's to David Newkirk, School Board President, North Thurston Public Schools, regarding Cameron Phillips school attack. President Newkirk, my 9-year-old grandson sustained a traumatic brain injury after being repeatedly punched and kicked in the head by another student on the playground at Seven Oaks Elementary School on February the 20th, 2019. After the unprovoked attack, he was examined by the school nurse and was treated with ice applied to his left temple and left leg. I picked up Cameron from school the next day for a scheduled dental appointment. His behavior during the car ride to the dental office and shortly after arrival there concerned me both as his grandfather and as a medical doctor. I contacted Olympia Pediatrics Clinic and was given an appointment for later that day. Dr. Amy Belko evaluated Cameron and ordered a CT scan of his head. Her conclusion was that Cameron had suffered a concussion, a traumatic brain injury from the attack. The next day, Cameron, his mother, my wife, and I attended a meeting at school, which included the principal, Cameron's fourth grade teacher, and the school counselor. Principal Lee offered Cameron a no-contact contract, which Cameron reluctantly signed. Cameron has experienced anxiety, disorientation, dizziness, fatigue, headaches, mental confusion, and nausea with varying degrees of severity and duration since the attack. When I went to the school gym on Monday to take Cameron home, he and about a half a dozen of his friends were eating lunch. Several of them promptly asked me if I'd heard about the attack on Cameron. I asked them if they had been given an opportunity to relate their recollections and or concerns about the attack to anyone at school, and their response was no. Cameron has suffered both physical and psychological trauma from this attack. Principal Lee commented during our conference at school on Friday the 22nd that the attack on Cameron was only the second, quote, fight at school since September. Acts of physical violence are not a daily occurrence at Seven Oaks Elementary School. I realized that the attack on Cameron was not as severe as a, quote, active shooter or a, quote, mass murder school event, but I submit that he and many of his fellow students have sustained varying degrees of psychological trauma. Cameron is not satisfied with a no-contact contract for the following reasons. Number one, he received the same punishment as the aggressor student. Number two, the contract expires at the end of the school year, and he's very concerned that the aggressor student will attack him again when the school begins next fall. Number three, he does not feel safe at school because every time he sees the aggressor student, he is reminded of the attack. Seven Oaks Elementary School has failed not only to prevent this physical attack on Cameron, but has failed to provide him and any other student at the school with counseling. These failures are incomprehensible and unconscionable. I expect North Thurston Public Schools to address and correct these failures immediately. Signed, Dwayne Enyart, MD.
Thank you, Doctor, very much. Dr. Enyart's the only one that signed up to speak. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the Board of Health? All right, thank you. Now move on to item number 4 on the agenda, consent items A and B.
I would move to adopt and approve consent items A and B.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Item number 5 is department items, and the first one is a Thurston County Local Impact Network Oral Health Project in Thurston County, but I think first we will do the proclamation. So you want to read that? Thank you.
Sure. Thurston County Proclamation, National Children's Dental Health Month. Whereas oral health is essential to an individual's general health and quality of life, and whereas oral health connects to your overall health and is integral to general health, and whereas there are associations between oral health and diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, babies born low birth weight, and babies born prematurely, and whereas Thurston County school-age children are having difficulty accessing dental care and are experiencing preventable oral health issues, and whereas 1 in 4 adults in Thurston County and 1 in 3 senior citizens do not have dental insurance, and whereas Thurston County children and adults are experiencing preventable dental pain and tooth loss, and whereas in a statewide effort to address the shared goal of improving health with a focus on oral health, the Arcora Foundation and Choice Regional Health Network launched the Thurston County Local Impact Network, which aims to reduce oral health disparities by increasing access to services that improve health outcomes. And whereas the American Dental Association is celebrating February 2019 as National Children's Dental Health Month to raise awareness about the importance of oral health. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Health hereby proclaims, and I think we have a typo we need to fix, March as National Children's Dental Health Month in Thurston County in recognition of the importance of the awareness of oral health, and urges all residents to recognize the critical importance of how oral health affects overall health. Adopted this 12th day of March 2019, Board of Health.
Thank you. Now we have Leslie Price here in the audience. Yes, come on up, Leslie. Thank you. And an entourage. This is why this is important, so go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Leslie Price, and I work at the Thurston County Public Health and Social Service Department. And first off, I want to thank you for doing the proclamation. February was National Children's Dental Health Month. Our department started working on a local dental health project last year. The project is funded by ORCORA, which is the Foundation of Delta Dental of Washington. The funding of our department is in the amount of $72,145, and we're funded from December 2018 to December 2019. And as you read in the proclamation, we are part of the Thurston County Local Impact Network, and from now on we'll refer to that as the LIN, so we don't have to say that every time. The LIN was created by Choice Regional Health Network in partnership with ORCORA. And I have several members of the LIN here, and they will be speaking in a moment. I'll let them introduce themselves. The aim of the LIN is to reduce oral health disparities in Thurston County by increasing access to services that improve health outcomes. This work helps our community make progress on an area that was noted in the clinical care strategy map of Thurston Thrives, increasing access to dental care. The LIN is focused on 7 strategies in Thurston County. Each strategy is led by a local Thurston County organization. I believe we have 3 organizations represented here. We have ORCORA, we have Choice Regional Health Network, and the Olympia Union Gospel Mission. And Katrin out there is part of Choice, but she's also the coordinator for the ABC Dental Program. Our department is a lead on 2 of the 7 strategies. The first one is a school-based dental sealant program, which involves coordinating with dental providers and schools to offer a school-based dental sealant program. And if you don't know, a dental sealant is a plastic material that is put on the chewing surfaces of the back teeth to provide a barrier against cavities. It's basically a really hard plastic so that bacteria and stuff can't get in there and cause cavities. The other strategy our department is the lead on is community education, which involves providing education on oral health and the connection to one's overall health, which also includes the importance of my passion, nutrition and oral health. So I now want to invite others from this project to come and share their involvement. So you can all come up, just share your name, organization, and how you're involved in the project. And I'd like to invite Karen from ORCORA to come up first. Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Lewis. I'm a senior program officer with ORCORA Foundation, and as Leslie mentioned, we're the Foundation of Delta Dental of Washington. And our mission is to improve overall and oral health for all people in Washington, with no one left behind. And part of that work is funding local impact networks. This is the second one that we've started. We have one in Spokane, this one in Thurston County, and then we have 2 others that are starting up with accountable communities of health across the state. We're really proud to be a part of this project and working with such outstanding partners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Bracken. I'm a Program Director at Choice Regional Health Network. We're a nonprofit healthcare collaborative that aims to improve health through the collective planning and action of healthcare leaders. We provide the administrative support to bring the different project leads here for the local impact network in Thurston County together. In addition, we're working to increase access for those that are seeking a dentist by enhancing our care coordination services. We're promoting the use of Dentist Link, an online tool for community members to find providers. We're providing training for our referral partners and recruiting dentists. We're also piloting a project called Oral Health Connections to increase access for patients who are diabetic or pregnant. I also want to acknowledge Caroline Sedano, who's not here. She's actually preparing for a motivational interview training for oral health community, and Katrin Palmer, who's in the audience as well, who are integral to this work.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Skip Steffen from the Olympia Union Gospel Mission, and we're privileged to own and operate a 3-chair dental clinic. Shelley Case is our dental clinic manager, and she's here to make sure I don't screw up too badly. And we provide between 1,800 and 2,000 visits a year at no fee. Our goal is to use the facility along with the time of our volunteer providers to provide no-fee dental care to those in Thurston County, excuse me, who cannot afford care and are underinsured or non-insured for care. And our part in this is particularly looking at low-income seniors who we regard as a particularly vulnerable group, and to especially those with diabetes whose disease is exacerbated by the fact that they cannot afford the prophylactic visits and are not seeing a dentist regularly, which for all the reasons that you mentioned in the proclamation exacerbates their diabetes and poor health. And it's kind of a cyclic phenomenon, because then when they can't chew, they don't eat as many vegetables and meats, and so more carbohydrate, and it just cycles. And so what we're doing under the auspices of this grant is we're bringing in seniors, and we're first providing them with all the prophylactic care that they need to restore their mouth as best we can, and we're using part of the money to hire a dental hygienist for specifically that purpose. And then they are referred to one of our volunteers who's agreed to do the restorative dental care on their mouth. And so by the time they're done with this, we hope to have restored their mouth to a good function. And then we're monitoring lab work and other standardized questionnaires at the beginning of the treatment. And then 6 months after, we will go back and get more lab data and repeat the standardized questionnaire in the hope of seeing some improvement in both their quality of life and the quality of their dentation. And so that's our goal for this project. And it's kind of exciting to think that we might be able to help this group of patients. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to see you, Skip.
Do you all have any questions for anyone?
Questions or comments?
Can't think of anything.
I don't know if I have any questions, but, you know, these folks have heard me say this before, but with our youth, I mean, they're 30% of our population, but 100% of our future. And I think everything we can do to invest in that future is well spent. So I want to thank you folks for dealing with on the youth side of it, but also, Skip, for you folks taking care of our unfortunate citizens as well. So thanks.
Oh, yes. And all of you folks that are involved in the Low Impact Network, thank you very much. So we'll hand these out.
They all say February, but yeah.
You get to be in front.
I won't bite.
Yes, perfect. All right, let me squeeze in the middle then.
Perfect. Now, I know this picture is going to have some
Mary Ann.
smiles.
Mary Ann need in here? Oh.
Yeah. Come on.
She should. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, department item number 6, NFP, our famous Nurse Family Partnership Program. Liz, who's coming up? Liz, Gretchen, Kathy, et al.
Get them all.
And a mom.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Gretchen Toller. I'm the Maternal Child Health Nurse Family Partnership Manager, and I'm here to share a little bit about our team's infant mental health endorsement. Infant mental health helps to guide the development of healthy social and emotional behaviors of young infants and children birth to 3 and is recognized as a key way to prevent and treat mental health problems of very young children and their families. It also recognizes that all early learning occurs in the context of relationships between a child and a caregiver. So we impact the infant's mental health by supporting parents' social and emotional needs and by building their skills and knowledge of responsivity to their child's emotional needs, one interaction at a time. So as you may know, 9 of our teammates all received our endorsement from the Washington Association of Infant Mental Health. And what endorsement is it's intended to recognize the experiences that lead to competency in the infant family field. It does not replace licensure or certification or credentialing, but it's meant to be an overlay to all of those things. So there's 4 levels of endorsement based on your education and years of experience. Our team has people at the level 2 and then the level 3 level. So why does it matter? Having staff with their infant mental health endorsement signifies a higher level of pregnancy, infancy, and early childhood mental health experience, skills, knowledge, and ability to form quality-based relationship-based interactions with families. It also provides the assurance of reflective supervision, which is something that we do weekly with each nurse on our team. With reflective supervision, there's a purposeful attention to all of the relationships, including the relationship between the nurse and the supervisor, the nurse and the parent, and between the parent and the child. Additionally, reflective supervision relates to professional and personal development within home visiting by attending to the sometimes difficult emotional content of the work and how our reactions affect the work. So for this process, it's been a long process. In November 2016, there was an opportunity to apply for funding for infant mental health training through, it was Department of Early Learning, now it's Department of Children, Youth, and Families with the state. I was successful with the application, and our team was given the chance to participate in a full year of training with an infant mental health trainer. After that year, we started our endorsement process, which probably took us a few months to get everybody's information put into a system. We had to go back to getting transcripts from college and looking at every piece of training that we've done over the years. So for Bonnie and I, it took us a little bit longer to go back. But after we got our applications in, it took about a year for them to review them and then move us forward. I would like to honor our team. Unfortunately, not everybody's here. We've got Amy, Bonnie, and Kathy, but also there's Fumi, Lori, Lindsay, Laura, and Sandy, who also participated. It was a long process, but one that helped to bring us closer together and definitely more confident in our skills around our work.
Wonderful. Anybody else going to speak?
So first of all, I'll let Gretchen answer this, but earlier this morning, Commissioner Hutchings, you asked sort of where does our program stand in terms of number of certifications versus other programs in the state. And so we did a little research on that. And Gretchen, what did you find out?
I'll scratch that question off here.
So our team does have the most members of our team in the state that are endorsed. So
yes, good.
So my hope for the coming year is that some of our newer staff that joined us at the beginning of last year, that we could start this process with them this year and hopefully get them endorsed as well. So,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I anticipated that would be the case, that we are leading the capital county.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
No, thank you very much, Gretchen, to you and your team.
Just congratulations. Sounds great.
Wait, I have one final question. With all the stuff you've been doing the last few years that we've been here, what's next?
It's been a busy few years.
Yeah, it has been.
This doesn't sound super exciting, but my hope for this year, we do have 2 new staff joining us. We did just hire a nurse that will start at the end of the month, we're pretty happy that she's joining our team. But hopefully, we really want to stabilize, not that we're not stable, but we want to just kind of settle in and, really work on just data and other things like that. But I mean, of course, if there's opportunity there may be opportunity for expansion funds with the state. We will definitely apply because we are still at a wait list in all 3 counties. So we would love to. And we do have, we have the incentive fund that I applied for, I guess, was that a year ago, that we received, that just recently came out. And that still is something that if we did receive more funding, they would increase our match. So we could potentially, get more funding from them as well if we were able to successfully receive more funding from the state or somewhere. So.
I tell you are stellar professionals.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I want to just say a few other things about universal home visiting and some state money that we think hopefully is going to become available, and the role of some of our staff in that. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the years, but brain science tells us that our experiences make a difference not only on who we are, but who we become later in life. And unfortunately, across our state and in Thurston County, there are many young children that face challenges that have long-term implications on their well-being. At the beginning of every school year, all kindergarten teachers in the state of Washington, including Commissioner Mintzer's wife, observe children during their everyday classroom activities, and they assess them in 6 domains. And that's part of the statewide WaKids assessment, which is the Washington Kindergarten Inventory of Developing Skills. You can see why they call it WaKids, because that's kind of a mouthful. The 6 domains are, number 1, social emotional. Those are things like sharing. Number 2 is language, things like following directions. Number 3 is literacy, which includes being able to identify short words. 4 is physical, which is getting better at simple movement skills like running or jumping. 5 is cognitive. That's something like being able to begin sustaining attention on things that are important to them or that they find interesting. And 6 is math. And one of those standards is being able to count to 10. So that helps, that assessment at the beginning of the year helps teachers understand what each child knows and can do at the beginning of the year. Thurston Thrives Partners for Children, Youth, and Families, the action team, which Commissioner Hutchings chairs, has identified kindergarten readiness as the number 1 most important measure for everything that they believe is important for kids in Thurston County. But sadly, in our county, only 50% of children are considered ready to learn in those 6 domains by the time they begin kindergarten. And in some of our school districts, that figure is as low as 24%. We can do better. And our Nurse Family Partnership Program is one of the most effective programs that is going to help improve those numbers. Kathy Sherman, one of our nurses, was recently featured on King 5 News with one of her NFP clients and her adorable daughter in a story about the importance of home visiting. I think all of you have had the pleasure of accompanying Kathy on a home visit, including Commissioner Mintzer yesterday, I believe.
Good.
We know that investing in early childhood works, and fortunately, in Governor Inslee's 2019-21 budget, there includes funding to create and implement a universal home visiting program. That means all newborns would have access to voluntary home visiting services by a nurse that would represent an additional $9 million in funding for home visiting and a total investment of $173 million for children and early learning opportunities. It would double the number of new mothers who would receive home visits. While those visits are over a shorter period of time and are less intensive than what our NFP program is able to provide, it's still an exciting development. If the governor's budget is approved, it would include funding for universal home visiting and universal newborn screening, a statewide early learning referral system to connect families with early learning services, a new affordable preschool program for low-income families, and also funding to build more early learning and preschool classrooms. And I just want to say a special thanks to Kathy and also to Gretchen. Gretchen worked really hard to help put together that King 5 segment, and Kathy and her client and her daughter were just absolute superstars, and really appreciate them showcasing how important these early interventions are in helping brain development and helping kids succeed. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Questions, comments? Go ahead.
Could I request that our county manager add that governor's bill to his lengthy list of legislation, because that would really impact county in several ways. So what would you call it? You called it universal home visit?
Yes, universal home visiting,
Okay.
and it's included in the governor's budget.
Okay, thanks.
It is a bill associated with that as well.
Right.
Way cool. Thank you, Liz. Thank you very
you.
much. Item number 7 on the agenda is adopting a resolution to support local public health services. Art Starry. Welcome, Art.
Good afternoon. I'm Art Starry. I'm the Environmental Health Director for Thurston County Public Health and Social Services, and I'm also involved with the Washington State Association of Local Public Health Officials, WSALFO, as one of their legislative folks who deal with things like this resolution that I'm asking you about. And so what I'm asking you to do today is to adopt a resolution as the Board of Health that urges the state legislature to recognize how important public health is to the needs of our community. It's an essential service, and we're also, WSALFO, and hopefully you, will be asking the legislature to provide adequate funding for that core service. The governor has provided proposed money in his budget for $20 million, however, the need is much greater than that. And so this resolution is following through with the WSALFO recommendation for trying to get the state to provide $100 million in funding for local public health or foundational public health services. And so you might ask, well, and then if you were to do that, then we would be sharing the resolution with WSALFO, and with your permission, I'd also be sharing it with our legislators to let them know that you're in support of this. And you might ask, well, why is this important? Well, as you know, the population both in Thurston County and in the state of Washington has been growing a whole lot. And the needs to provide basic public health services, or the sorts of things that people expect the governmental system to do, is still there. It's probably greater than it's ever been. However, resources have been diminishing. And as you know, there's been things like measles outbreaks in other counties. We've had problems like blue-green algae things showing up in Summit Lake. Stuff that's kind of traditional stuff has been popping up. And in addition, if you look at some of the trends in our community and trends in the state, you'll find that there's emerging things that are continuing to be, or that are problems. So we have obesity rates that are high, and we've had, I think Shelley has talked to you before about how if you look at our current generation of folks right now, the young folks, their life expectancy may be shorter than their parents, which is really scary. It shouldn't be happening, and that's what the public health system needs to be able to do a better job of. To be able to look at things like data, to be able to look at the trends in population health, to be able to do things like evaluate, the cause of disease and develop interactions, to be able to respond to emergencies, to provide good information to folks so that they can make good decisions about things like vaccinations, to be able to, respond to emergencies, and to do the things in environmental health like looking at algae blooms and the like, responding to foodborne outbreaks that fees and things can't pay for. And so that's what this resolution is asking you to do. What happens, there's a bill associated with this, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before during your legislative discussions. It's called House Bill 1497, and it's kind of the policy piece that would go with the funding that comes in. And it's defined a list of kind of key public health services that the governmental system needs to provide. And if funding is provided, it also sets forth a mechanism for how that funding would be distributed between the state, local health, and the tribes. Those are all kind of the key partners in the governmental system that we hope that need to work together to be able to assure that everybody who's in the state of Washington, whether they're visiting or they live here or they work here, that they're getting basic public health, or the appropriate public health services, again, no matter where they are, no matter where they work. And so that's what the intent of this is. I could go on further. I've attached a couple of things that provide more information. I won't put them up on screens or anything, but they have provided them for you. This is a high priority both for, well, it's the #1 priority for the Washington State Association of Local Public Health Officials. That long word that I can manage to get out, or that long phrase, is also the #1 priority for the Washington State Association of Counties, or one of their 3 promotions. There's a whole group of public health advocates across the state who are also supporting this, and so that's why we're hoping that you'll support it as well. And it also really fits in well with the county strategic plan. If you look at the different things that you've adopted as priorities for the county, improving public health outcomes, improving community health, wellness, and safety, it helps us do that. Helps deal with emergency management. That's one of the things that we sometimes struggle with. And again, rambling on a little bit, but for instance, today, even though measles isn't a big issue in Thurston County, the fact that we're spending a lot of time working on that, I think we've probably spent close to $50,000, even though we don't have a case related to the Clark County case, but just checking in on those things and making sure that that's not happening, to make sure that the people who are talking to their doctors about rashes, to make sure that those cases aren't related. That's taken a ton of time. You don't read about it in the paper, but it's taken a lot of effort. If we had something else going on at the same time, I think we'd be hurting. It also deals with help support environmental health and those sorts of things that we work on that aren't necessarily fee supported, but the people expect us to do. And it also, of course, provides a revenue source. As we know, we're really struggling with trying to make sure that we have the funds to do the key public health work in the community that we need to do. And this is really trying to set up the pathway for that. So I'm asking you to support or to adopt or approve Resolution H1 2019.
Questions?
Thanks, Art, for all you do.
Thank you.
Questions?
Nothing.
I'm glad you brought that point up that, it's our obligation to keep the entire county, everybody in our county safe, but they don't realize all the work that goes on behind the scenes. That doesn't make the paper. It's a ton of money and a ton of time and a ton of expertise.
Yeah, and we are actually glad that stuff doesn't make the headlines, because sometimes if it does, it's not. But every once in a while it does, whether it's oil spills or measles or something like that. We try to do what we can to keep the community safe.
Yeah, thank you, Art. So is there a motion?
I will move to approve Board of Health Resolution H1 2019, urging the Washington State Legislature to recognize that public health is essential and to provide the crucial $100 million in funding needed for the 2019 to 21 biennium and beyond to support core services in all communities and allow public health to rebuild its statewide system with added efficiency.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries. Thank you, Art, very much.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7, food and environmental. We got environmental health coming in now. We got Sammy Berg. Good to see you, Sammy.
Good afternoon. My name is Sammy Berg. I'm the supervisor for the Food and Environmental Services section, a part of Environmental Health, and also therefore a part of the Public Health and Social Services Department. The main things that we do in the Food and Environmental Services are inspect restaurants, pools, and schools, and then we do a smattering of other things, including bats, lead, smoking, and some bugs thrown in. So we do. Do we have a?
What?
Oh, the slide basically just shows pictures of food, pools, schools,
and bugs.
So without that, then you're not really losing much. But basically,
we have a copy of it in our packet.
Yeah, a copy of it. For the food side of it, that's literally the bread and butter of our our group's work, we have 1,000 food establishments in Thurston County that we permit. And of those, we inspect them once or twice a year. We also do inspections at temporary food events like festivals, the fair, things like that. We do about 400 of those a year. And the intent behind all those is making sure that the food is being prepared in a safe fashion so that people can get good food that doesn't make them sick. Generally, when we do the inspections, they take about 30 minutes to an hour or so to do. And we have a couple different risk categories that we kind of divide the restaurants into. And so, as an example, minimal risk is like a grocery store. Low risk would be a bakery or maybe espresso. Medium risk would essentially be like a fast food place where you cook the food and serve it. And then the high risk would be complex food production, like a full-on sit-down restaurant, folks that make sushi, folks that do a lot of food production from scratch. So there's a lot more of them literally playing with the food. So the things that we're looking for when we're doing the inspection are called risk factors, and these are the main things that science shows us that lead to people getting sick from bad food, essentially. And there's the food source being, coming from unapproved locations, the temperature, which is basically meaning that we need to keep the food either hot or cold so that bacteria doesn't grow in it. The fact that the employees need to be healthy while they're making this food so that we don't have sick employees touching food. And that goes literally hand in hand with employees washing their hands. That's one of the key factors in keeping you safe from that. And then also making sure that the surfaces and we don't do cross-contamination between, say, that drippy raw chicken to salad.
This is your thing.
Oh, thank you.
You can thank Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay. We, about 9% of the inspections a year, I have about 35 red points, so which is not quite bad enough to have to do a reinspection, but there's a couple problems. So just kind of give you an idea of the vast majority of our inspections go really well, and there's a couple problems, but not too bad. And then, of course, there are some that are have more problems. The bulk of those problems get solved before the inspector leaves, and so that's one point where the public tends to be confused, where they see a whole laundry list of violations and then think, so what happened? And a lot of what happened is described in that report, but basically if it's about washing hands, then we make the employee wash their hands. If it's about the food's at the wrong temperature, then we look at chilling it or cooking it again or even throwing it away because you can't recover it. But all those corrections happen while the inspector is there. And then some of the long-term things like you need to repair your floor, for instance. That way we'll get into negotiations around how long would that take. But that's not our primary concern because people aren't eating on the floor. They're eating off of the surfaces. They're eating food that people wash, whether or not they wash their hands, those primary risk factors. The fees that cover that part of our program are covered by annual fees. And for example, a medium restaurant, medium size, and about a medium risk category, the fees are $890 for the year, just to give you kind of an example of that. I am planning on coming back to you with another briefing in a couple months to talk about revising Article 2, which covers food, because we want to update some of the language, but also update our enforcement procedures so that we allow for some more pathways to get between a problem and its solution. Right now, what's described in Article 2 is pretty rigid, and we want to give some more flexibility to that. But I'll be coming back to that later. So moving on to pools. We have about 100 pools in the county. Most of those are in hotels or apartment complexes. We go there to inspect and primarily make sure that the water chemistry is good. Basically, the sanitizer that's in the pool, usually chlorine, is really the only thing that's keeping the pool or the spa from becoming basically people soup. And we want to keep that from happening. So that's where we keep an appropriate level of chlorine in there. But of course, too much can also be problematic. So there's some balancing there, and our effort is to try to make sure that the maintenance folks that are usually in charge of these pools are doing what they need to do. They're challenged by a lot of turnover and not a whole lot of time or training be given to deal with just the pool, and so that's one of our challenges, is trying to make sure that enough resources of the facility are given to whoever is actually managing that pool. We do have violations. We get those corrected. We sometimes have to do closures, primarily because if the chlorine level in 4,000 or 5,000 gallon pool is off, it just takes a while for that to recover and to get corrected. And so sometimes we have to close it down and then come back a day or two or whatnot later to come back and check that it's okay. We had, for example, 59 closures in 2018, and the vast majority of those had to do with some sort of improper chemical level that they were able to fix, and we were able to get back open again. Those things are also covered by permit fees. For example, a pool for year-round is about $1,000, $955. We have a voluntary program where they do extra training and actually go through a probation period with us about being a certified pool operator, and that saves them some money on fees. And the exchange basically is we have more confidence in their ability to do things to adequately keep the pool going, so then we can spend more attention to the folks that are having more problems. Oops, kind of moving forward there. We have about 100 schools in Thurston County between K through 12, public and private, that we inspect. And here we're doing two things. One, we're looking at all their kitchens and doing the exact same food stuff that we would expect from any other restaurant. But we also once a year go to these places to look at what we call a health and safety inspection. So we're looking at the whole campus, we're looking at the playgrounds, we're looking at the chemistry rooms, the shop rooms, classrooms, and looking at a variety of safety things and making sure that the student's environment is safe, it's well lit, it's clean, the chemicals are stored appropriately, no overt hazards are there, and then working with the school districts to get those solved. So basically we go in for 2 kitchen inspections a year, and then once a year we do this health and safety inspection. That is done on a fee for service. Basically and it's a voluntary program, but all the schools in Thurston County are very willing to participate with it, which we much appreciate. This is one of these places where we don't necessarily have the regulatory authority to say, fix that broken swing set or whatnot. Obviously, though, once we point it out, the schools generally are very willing to, correct the problem. But it's a very functional and working partnership that works well for the overall protection of the children. Oh, no. There we go. One of the pieces that are not covered by fees that we do are the more critter parts of our job. A big part of that is rabies. So we deal a lot with bat exposures in Thurston County. We're fortunate in Washington State overall that bats are the only animal that routinely carries rabies. And so we are very sensitive to bat exposures or potential bat exposures, and we want to make sure that we understand, okay, so who found the bat? Where was it? Was it alive? Did someone touch it? Go through all those processes. Because our intent basically is to try to evaluate, was there the potential for rabies to get from this bat to this person or this family? The analysis of that takes some time, and we're more than happy to do that. Ideally, what we're trying to do is prevent a rabies case in a human. We haven't had one in Washington State since the mid-90s, but rabies is almost universally fatal, and obviously we want to avoid that. And so we're very conservative around bat exposures, and we definitely want people to be able to contact us and say, hey, I found a bat in my house, so that we can talk about it before they let the bat go away. Because if they still have the bat and it's stuck in a room, or they put it in a shoebox or whatever they did, we can then test the bat. And if the bat's negative, that's great. If the bat's positive, then we can see about getting the person some shots so that we make sure that we don't end up with a human case of rabies. But it all begins with that phone call, and part of it is weekend calls and evening calls and whatnot, where they get to the health department through 911 dispatch. But the overall message there is certainly if you have a bat in your house, please call the health department before you let the bat go. Dogs and cats certainly also bite and scratch people. We're not as worried with them because we don't have a lot of other wild animals besides bats that carry rabies in Washington. But it's another place where we want to make sure that the dogs and cats are vaccinated because they provide that barrier between wildlife and our families from a perspective of rabies. For a dog and cat bite, it's easier because we don't have as much concern. So then we just have the animal watched for 10 days as it's still healthy. And at the end of 10 days, the dog or cat's healthy, we're all good. Because if they had rabies at the time of the bite, within 10 days they would be dead. And so it's a real simple, real easy, real low impact. Is the dog still healthy? Good, you know. We do get a huge amount of assistance with this effort through the Joint Animal Services Group, and we're very pleased that they're around because they literally save us all kinds of effort. And not only having to deal with live animals and euthanize them so we can test, but also just dealing with a lot of the dogs and cats that need to be quarantined for 10 days, that the owner is not able to do that, or it's a stray or something along those lines. But they're very helpful and a very valued partner in this process. That is just to kind of follow up on Art's comments. The bat work and those kinds of things would be part of that foundational public health. It is something that there's no fee for. We obviously can't say, oh, you found a bat in your house, we'll come over if you give us $200. You know, obviously, that's not part of our public health, but it is part of that broader disease prevention work that is part of that currently general fund piece that would certainly be supported by additional funds from the state. A newer program, or we've been doing this for a while, but dealing with lead in homes and definitely through blood screening, seeing Thurston County children with elevated blood lead levels. We're all pretty aware of the impact on mental health from that and mental development. The state, since 2018, put together a new program where they were basically helping subsidize a more intensive investigation. So when we get a call now from this, we have the funds and the staffing to go to the person's house, talk to the parents, interview them, look at the environment, and try to, hopefully in 1 or 2 meetings, figure out what the problem is, what the potential source of lead is, try to resolve that, and move the child on towards some monitoring to make sure that that indeed solved the problem. And so that's a good partnership between us and the Washington State Department of Health. For example, it varies quite a bit, but about a dozen cases a year are brought to our attention within Thurston County of children screening with higher levels of blood lead. This is the group that unfortunately we're out busy doing field work and inspections and weren't able to come to this. We have a person and a half that do the admin work. I have 5 inspectors. I have 1 person that does all the plan reviews, and then myself. We also have someone that comes in part-time and does the food worker training, where she has literally trained thousands of Thurston County residents how to wash their hands and keep food hot and cold. And that's the bulk of the presentation. Where we're coming up with as far as newer projects this year, we will be looking to purchase some software to help us move into doing digital inspections using a tablet to capture the inspections and not having to do paper and then pay someone basically then to translate that to digital, and that'll improve our ability to get information to the public. And that goes hand in hand with looking at posting restaurant scores, kind of following along what Public Health Seattle King County has done, and being able to get the public a quicker and more direct access to what that particular restaurant did in their inspection. That is my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. I know I went through that pretty quickly.
Questions?
No. Thank you, Tammy.
Questions?
Can I ask a dumb question?
Please.
How do you go about catching a bat?
I have tried to do that at 3 o'clock at someone's house, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're very good at making you look silly. I'm glad there's no video evidence of that. Actually, either fishing nets or tennis rackets work very well. The downside is that it kind of sometimes can actually harm the bat, and mainly, especially if we want to test it, we need the brain intact. And so if you smash it, we can't test it well. But what works well is actually just letting it fly around until it gets tired, and then it'll hang on a wall, and that's when you get your trusty shoebox and over the wall and some cardboard, and then you have the box or bat in a box. But it takes some patience.
And
but
wear gloves.
Well, certainly. And yeah, and that's then you call the health department, and we have this conversation around where it was found, what was going on, and basically trying to assess if anyone was potentially exposed or not. But we, off the top of my head, I think we took about 80 calls this summer about bats. And if we actually end up with a bat that we have to test and do all that, then that's probably a good hour and a half to 2 hours of effort in that whole process, depending on what the results are. So it does keep us busy. We had a bat that was positive for rabies found in a daycare center this summer, and so we had to vaccinate a couple of young kids because of that. But that's, again, part of why we're there to do that thing and make sure we don't have a problem.
So where do you send it for testing? Does Animal Services hold it and it goes?
It goes up to the state public health lab up in Shoreline, just north of Seattle. And so usually we get the results back the next day. And so it's a very quick turnaround, which is great. But that also gives us the time then to get the bat tested before we have folks start a very expensive shot series if it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any more, we hear once in a while, there was a case a few months ago where in some other state, lead was found in the school water system. We talked about that. Do you test just the pools, or you test the water regularly? So
the school water systems, they're all considered public water supplies, and so they work with the state to do their routine monitoring as the source from like the well or the school pub or the public utility that's providing that. The state, as part of their overall lead strategy over the last at least 2 years, has been targeting schools for a high level of lead testing. Like they're going in and testing several dozen faucets per school kind of level of intensity, and looking for old faucets and looking for the plumbing connections that can add to lead. There's been several in Thurston County that they've tested that some have come up clean, some have come up with a couple hits, and they're old style fountains or sinks that aren't used very often or whatnot, and they've gone to make those corrections. But that is part of a focused effort. When we look at a school, we are not quite that intense on that particular problem. We're looking more at lighting, ventilation, the more overt safety hazards. And then, like I said, the water side of things is done either routinely or, like the State Department of Health is doing this intensive sampling right now to try to deal with that. That's something that once constructed, though, usually doesn't change that much. So it's not something that we have to go in every year and look at.
So the water system is not the county issue.
Correct.
But if we end up with a ton of kids that are getting sick with lead poisoning, that becomes a county health issue?
Yeah, and usually the kids that screen high for lead levels, those are more 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds. Okay. Because they're the ones that are crawling on the floor and everything goes in the mouth, and they're small. And so that level of exposure is magnified by all that. And they're, of course, the ones that are more, they're at that stage where they're most impacted by that, but also the greatest potential to try to solve that problem and remove that from a concern. And so usually it's more routine well baby checks and whatnot. Those are usually where the screenings happen and where we're trying to do the intervention. So by the time the child gets to school, it is still a concern. We certainly want to make sure it's not a problem, but it's lesser of a concern than for a toddler.
Good. Thank you, Sam. Sammy,
sure.
Anything else?
No.
Nope. Thank you, sir.
All right. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you.
It was a good balance of enviro and social services, too.
Yeah.
Good balance. Thank you. We're moving to item number 9 on the agenda, Board of Health members, health-related activities. Do you have anything to report? Mr. Edwards?
Biosolids and water. I'll just let it go at that. That was what my Department of Health, or Health, or Board of Health activities consisted of.
Okay.
Last week I attended the opioid task force meeting, and we had a draft plan that we worked on to try to really put the, the rubber on the road there with the component to the plan. We broke into work groups. I was in the criminal justice work group, and we had a great discussion about innovative ways we could use medicated assisted treatment, and who the different players would have to be to make those changes in policy. So that was a good discussion. So I think that's moving forward. And yesterday I got to be a ride-along with Kathy for the nurse family program, and it was, much has been said, and I'll just echo all of that. It was really instructive, and she did a great job of just a really nice connection with the young mother. And we had a very young child, and I hadn't been around a baby in quite a few years, so it's kind of neat. And just to see what was going on, it was very instructive, and I thank Shelley for letting commissioners do that, and Kathy for letting me tag along. And Gretchen for giving me a kind of introduction and debrief at the end. So it was all a good use of my time.
Wonderful. And the only thing I have to add, health report-wise, was I think back in the fall I had my flu shot, and just a couple weeks ago I got my second and final shingle prevention or shingle vaccination shot. So I think I'm done and dusted now. Am I?
Pneumonia.
No. Don't want that. That's it. So now let's move on to the health officer's report. Dr. Wood.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's good? Okay. So I am going to talk about infectious diseases. I will start with measles, and wanted to just share with the community the impact of measles that has been happening. Well, it's all around us, but I'm going to focus on Washington State. In Thurston County, I'm happy to say we have no confirmed measles and no suspect measles, and long may that exist.
Yeah.
And the Secretary of Health presented to Congress, Secretary Weisman, and for that he got some data together from Clark and from Washington. Wanted to say that in Clark County, as of the 4th of March, there had been 148 potential measles investigated. In the rest of the state, 119, so that includes some Thurston County suspect cases, for a total of 267 investigated cases. We have, as you know, 71 confirmed cases, and currently that is holding. Cases were ruled out often prior to contact investigation. So if you are concerned about a highly infectious disease like measles, and you suspect measles, you have to identify who has been exposed. You need to limit exposure to susceptible people. You need to monitor for additional cases. You need to establish diagnostic testing. You need to assist with treatment as possible, because people who are exposed, who are susceptible, have a window of time within which they could, at first 72 hours, get a measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And if that window has passed, they still have up to 6 days after exposure to get immune globulin. So for instance, in Clark County, pregnant women and infants under the age of 12 months have been prioritized to get the immune globulin. And so that's where public health can assist with treatment as needed. Public health also alerts healthcare providers and schools, and also educates the public. So in the state of Washington, as of the 4th of March, 4,514 contacts had been identified, and all those contacts need to be reach for an initial interview via the phone, and hopefully they've had their measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, because then the level of anxiety about them getting measles decreases significantly. Some, about 10% have been unable to be contacted, and then for some, surveillance needs to happen. And surveillance is active or passive monitoring for 21 days after exposure. Sometimes the exposure may have occurred over a period of days, so you start worrying about the individual after, about 7 days after the first date of exposure, and you worry about them up to 21 days after the last date of exposure. So for instance, if there was a gathering of individuals that lasted for 4 days, and then somebody became positive for measles like the day after that, you are monitoring people from 7 days after the first possible exposure of that 4-day. And the reason I bring that up is that although we have only had 7 suspect cases, we have been notified by the State Department of Health of individuals who are from Thurston County who were exposed to measles in other areas. So for instance, last weekend I was notified by the state that there was a gathering of people in their 20s and 30s in Oregon. Following that gathering, an individual who was there went to another state in the nation and came down with measles. And that state notified Washington State, and then Washington State proceeded to let me know of individuals in both of my 2 counties that had been exposed. So that requires investigation to see if those individuals are protected or not, or if they're, and making a plan for if they are starting to develop symptoms, whether or not that they shouldn't go to their doctor's office and sit around in the waiting room for 2 hours while they're waiting to be seen. They need to be notifying the doctor's office and waiting in their car and being evaluated. So I'm droning on a bit. I wanted to also move on to talk about influenza and let you know that it is still happening. We tend to monitor various parameters with influenza. We look at people who come into emergency departments with something we call influenza-like illness, and then how many tests are ordered, how many are positive, the percent positive. And the markers for all of those are still above baseline. And I can let you know that the several schools in Thurston County did call to notify us today that their absenteeism is above 10% and for respiratory illness. We don't know what respiratory illness, but we do know for respiratory illness. And one thing, jumping back to measles, in terms of the impact, there was a small article in the Olympian by one of our the physicians who work for the State Department of Health about how 800 children had been excluded from school so far in this outbreak because they were susceptible to measles and they were exposed at school. So the impact of this outbreak is having, is rolling out like a drop of water in a pond. Switching back to influenza, there have been a total of 46 outbreaks in long-term care facilities in the past 6 months. We have one in Thurston County this week. And there have been a total of 70 deaths in this influenza season throughout the state of Washington. And in Thurston County, we have at least 3 confirmed in individuals who either had comorbidities or were elderly. So I'm going to stop there and see if any of you gentlemen have questions.
Go ahead.
What kind of an impact do these communicable diseases have with the immigrant community? Either vaccinations, do you offer vaccinations, or a lot of folks show up here that have not been vaccinated and that creates a threat? How do you know if somebody, I mean, I guess I've been vaccinated for everything, or I've had everything by now, I suppose, but is there a test to
Yes.
know if I've had the proper vaccinations, or?
Yes, and often I can put it in the context of healthcare providers. Healthcare providers are asked before they're hired, say, by a large clinic or a hospital system, to show proof of immunity to various infectious diseases, because you certainly don't want. When I was a medical student, I was on call in a children's hospital in Denver, Colorado, and that night the intern didn't really have much to do, and that intern wandered around and examined all the babies on the unit, and 2 days later came down with chicken pox. So that was not the kind of exciting that we want to deal with. So getting back to answering your question, there is a test to see if you're immune to measles, or often we recommend that people get another measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination in order to have protection. And it depends on the individual, how old they are, and their occupation in terms of, now in school, kids are required to have 2 MMRs by the time they're in kindergarten.
Well, like newcomers that come here, say immigrants that are here just for a couple of years, or maybe a couple days, I don't know, do they have some access to go for these type of immunizations to prevent the spread of things like measles?
Well, we
do you
definitely
have clinics for them, or?
Well, in Thurston County, we usually have our Medical Reserve Corps is part of our partnership to reach out. We have the Little Red Schoolhouse back-to-school clinics. We have back-to-school clinics at Kaiser Permanente. These are usually in August and in September. But throughout the rest of the year, people who are coming from other countries can go to either to their physician if they have a physician, or to pharmacies, because many pharmacies are wonderful partners in providing vaccines.
Are they able to get this at no charge to them?
I don't want to say that because it depends. I know that we have also partnered with the Olympia Free Clinic at times to provide, for instance, influenza vaccine in the fall, because we're trying to prepare people for the winter flu season.
Wouldn't it be worth it, though, for us to give free immunizations to especially at-risk communities?
I think that's a very important question to ask.
But we don't do it? The state doesn't have a program, we don't have a program? We're just taking a chance? Is that what's
Well, I don't know enough about it. In Seattle, there is an immigrant and refugee health program, and I don't know what their policies are up there, because that's a large concentration of people from other countries.
No, that'll do it for me, I guess.
Yeah, okay. And I have
Something to look
nothing
into,
else.
though.
I have nothing else. Thank you, Doctor, for all you do. Another director's report.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you
afternoon.
very much. It has been a very busy month at Public Health and Social Services, some of which you have heard of today. And Board of Health is always my favorite day of each month, because I really get the chance to appreciate and recognize the amazing work of all of our staff at Public Health and Social Services, as well as all of our community partners that work together with us to improve the health and well-being of our community. So in light of that, I want to share a few program highlights in just a brief amount of time here. For one, I just want to say thank you again to the Food Environmental Services staff. I was sorry that they couldn't be here to be further recognized after Sammy's presentation, because many people do not know that our staff are on call or working 24/7, 365 days a year. They are just tireless workers, very passionate about public health, and when that bat signal goes up, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Sammy will respond. So they do amazing work. Also in environmental health this month, Further evidence of that is in our solid and hazardous waste program. We had 2 major incidents that we were able to work together with partners to resolve. One of those was a mercury spill at a local school, and our staff were able to work in partnership with the Department of Ecology, the school district officials, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency to respond to a spill in a school lab and make sure that the kids were safe, that the material was properly disposed of, that the classroom was clean, and and the employees were all taken care of, and the kids were back to school or back in the classroom within 24 hours. So we're really happy about that partnership and that work, and that's the kind of stuff that we do every day that is that foundational public health. We also, as you know, in our community had a oil spill as a result of a spill at the old Tumwater Brewery facility, and our staff were able to support the response for that effort, give public health advice to protect the public and those accessing the park and protect our waters. So really great partnership. Really proud of all the staff's work on that. You also heard from the Developmental Disabilities Program, Jennifer Popchak-Hakeem and her staff, and they held a high school transition fair in partnership with about 30 other local community providers last week on March 6th. And it was an amazing success, and our staff produced a new resource guide of which we will provide a copy of for you. It's something that we're really proud of, really makes a difference in the lives of those that you heard from today that have developmental disabilities. We also, in our specialized recreation program, received another donation from the Park Foundation in the amount of $5,224. And these were a result of a grant from the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound to help offset fees and scholarships in 2019. So we're really grateful for them. You also heard from Mark Moffitt, our community program manager for our Veterans Assistance Program, and while today he was talking about traumatic brain injury from all of the veterans that he serves and works with at the Lacey Veterans Hub through our Veterans Assistance Program, in the last month we worked with 25 veterans providing financial assistance that support things like housing and basic needs. So we're really proud of that work. You also know that it was a lot of hazardous weather this last month. Thurston County leads our regional hazardous weather task force through our Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention within our department and manages the Extreme Weather Shelter Program. And that provides shelter and accommodations for unhoused citizens during episodes of extreme weather, such as the big snowstorm that we had last month that canceled this Board of Health meeting that we had to move some of the agenda items over. As a result, we declared Code Blue for 12 days, and that involved many partners working together, Thurston County partnering with the City of Olympia and our other local jurisdictions, many nonprofit providers and other community providers, and I just wanted to briefly share a little bit about the success and the lives that were saved and the health concerns that were mitigated as a result of us having this Code Blue hazardous weather program during last month. So 536 extra bed nights were provided at the Salvation Army and Pear Blossom Place shelter. So that was about 45 people per night. That was during the regular cold weather. The extra Code Blue on those severe weather nights were 2,747 bed nights. That was across the entire shelter system, so 229 people per night. Approximately 1,410 survival items were distributed to unsheltered individuals outside the shelter system. And so that included things like blankets, hats, gloves, hand warmers, snacks, batteries, and water. Approximately 270 contacts were made with unsheltered individuals through outreach efforts in hopes to engage them with our coordinated entry system so that we can help support them in obtaining permanent housing down the road. 24 rides were given to individuals seeking shelter, and Intercity Transit was instrumental in the success of this program, and we thank them for their support with that. 619 volunteer hours were utilized at the Salvation Army Code Blue shelter, and 39 volunteer outreach hours to support shelter-in-place efforts. We also heard reports from law enforcement and emergency medical that this helped reduce their work and their response calls to those suffering from exposure. So they were very grateful for that. So we will continue this effort. It's not over yet. We still have some possible cold weather coming up, but this program is supported by some of our housing funds. And so I also wanted to announce that we have a request for proposals for several different programs: our Community Investment Partnership Program, our housing programs, and our treatment sales tax programs. And anyone that's interested in learning more or applying for those programs can look on our website. Those applications are due April 5th and make an incredible impact on our community. Our syringe services program collected 282,336 syringes in 2019. So that's since January 1st. The good news is 23% of those syringes were collected for disposal only, meaning the program's taking in more syringes than we're distributing. And our staff also dispensed 485 doses of naloxone. So that's 485 lives saved due to this program, potentially. We're also happy, this was also discussed by Commissioner Menzer in his reporting of the opioid task force that met last week, that the Olympia buprenorphine clinic has opened at the Capital Recovery Center. That's also where our syringe services program operates, and is accepting clients, and we're very happy to be working and partnering with them to facilitate people in accessing treatment. And in our vital services program, we had 326 birth certificates and 797 death certificates distributed. So very busy month for us at Public Health. And again, I'm very proud and very grateful and amazed by all the hard work of our staff. And again, congratulations to the nurses that achieved their endorsement and for all the amazing work that they do in the community.
Well,
do you have any questions?
Do you have a comment, question?
Shelley, could you report on Ms. Marino? Like, last time we heard from her a month or so ago, she was kind of getting up and running and getting feet on the ground, and I'd like to hear a report on kind of like how she's doing and how she's spending her time over the last month in terms of homelessness and response.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yes. So Keely Marino is the Thurston County's Homeless and Affordable Housing Response Coordinator, and started back in January. And actually, we will be featuring Ms. Marino at the next Board of Health meeting. And she's going to share her report on everything that she's been working on and all the coordination and partnerships. And it's just been amazing. A lot of her time has been spent on supporting the Code Blue efforts and establishing interjurisdictional partnerships and community partnerships, and helping to provide solutions to our homeless crisis, which you declared last June. So she's been very busy, lots of exciting work that has been happening, and so you'll get to hear from her more next month.
When is our next Board of Health meeting? Does anybody have the date? Roughly a month.
That is, I believe,
April 9th.
9th.
Thank you.
Anything else? Gary?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I have one question, Shelley. Regarding the Hazardous Weather Task Force and/or Code Blue, you said that we worked with Olympia and other jurisdictional partners. Does that include South County?
Yes, it does. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. We have lots of engagement at that table from South County representatives that participate in our Hazardous Weather Task Force. And one of the big focus areas of concern during our extreme hazardous weather was ensuring that we had shelter-in-place plans for those in rural communities that we couldn't reach or transport into some of the emergency Code Blue shelters.
Good, thank you. Thank you. All right, with that, no other comments, questions, concerns? All right. Move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Oh,
Second.
keep turning this way. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.